Hi, Euclid family. I have Marilyn Robb with me here today. And Marilyn, you were hand selected by our lay leadership team to share with us some of the ways that you lead at Euclid. To start us off, can we start with something light and fun? And can you tell us something new you've been doing during COVID?
Oh, nothing new in particular. Actually, what I am kind of doing are what I call the projects. I'm gathering up like pictures and papers of the kids that have just been put in corners or in a box and sorting it out. I'm probably going to live another 20 years, but I figured this is a time to get that organized and they can just then have it. So
That's amazing.
it,
What a
it
wonderful,
isn't like,
yeah.
it could sound depressing, but it's not.
I can imagine that's
And
time.
time to read. Well, it's fun. Yeah.
Good.
Sometimes I don't feel like doing anything. And then sometimes I'm ambitious. I have clean closets and all of those things that I think everybody else has done. So,
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Thank you for sharing that, Marilyn. Um, could you share with us which committee you currently lead and what are some of the skills and or gifts of that this committee does in terms of their work?
I chair the reconciling committee, and I think that's an important committee in one respect to show the committee, to show the community what the church is. I think the church is often viewed by people who don't go to church or whatever as some sort of stuffy um, place that's not really related to the community. And so the attempt to show that we are really supportive of the gay and lesbian community and transgender folks. We've been able to give the award, the Bruce Scott Award, for instance, last year to a young woman at the high school, and she was shocked that that a church would have anything to do with the LGBTQ community. So that's one thing. I think it's also important that the LGBTQ people feel safe somewhere and that there's a church and a God that loves them. I think too often churches are separate people from God in that respect. So I think that's an important thing. And simply to raise awareness of the issues within our denomination too, where the community, the culture has really moved forward in relation to gay and lesbian things. It hasn't so much, the church, the denomination hasn't. So we're trying to help to move that along. And obviously the General Conference is trying to meet, but COVID has prevented that from happening. So we'll hope that one of these days the church catches up with the culture, as opposed to John Wesley, who said the church should lead the culture.
Yes. Well, thank you for leading in this such important way. What are your skill sets as you chair the reconciling committee that you find useful as the chair?
Well, I was a pastor for 34 years, so that throws in a helpful piece that one, I didn't lead committees, but sort of led the church, so that's fine. In terms of one time when my son was 14, although I'd been in the church for about 8 years by the time he was that age, he said to me, "Mom, what does a pastor really do?" And I said, well, to get the attention of a 14-year-old, I said, well, I don't know about others, but for me, I'm a hooker. And then I paused, and he kind of got a shocked look on his face. And I said, well, I find a resource and I find a person and hook them up.
Nice.
And that might, and actually I said that flippantly at the time, but afterwards I thought that really works. So the sense of hooking people up with each other. I remember one time in a sermon talking about my brother who lived on the streets and all that sort of thing. And I had 3 people in the church come up to me and say, I've had, or two of them, a child had committed suicide. And she said that she felt for the first time that she had somebody else, me, that she could share that with. But three people came and said that to me. And so I said to each of them, well, there are more people in this church that have similar situations to yours. And it might be helpful to connect you three. And all three of them said no, but it could have been helpful. And sometimes people feel like they're not connected to God at all, and they want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so the church, particularly Reconciling, can do that and help people realize that that can happen. So being a pastor is helpful. I believe in not necessarily leading from the front and pulling people along, but leading from behind and kind of nudging them along. So we, for instance, were able to, without much effort, it was suggested that we might make the Black Lives Matter banners, because the gay and lesbian, transgender people are really on the margins, but so has racism put people there. So Reconciling did that. We just created those banners. I saw the banner, Black Lives Matter to God and to Us, if you can imagine, on a Winnetka Presbyterian church. And so I took that idea and we created that for ourselves. And I contacted that pastor and told him that we had stolen his idea. So those kinds of things, and just, you know, connecting people and connecting them to needs out in the community, and the community maybe having needs that the church can meet. So that's kind of what we're doing and what I'm doing in Reconciling.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. What are some of the challenges that your committee faces?
I feel one of them is that we don't have enough people. We only have, I think, 7 or 8 people. And I'm wishing, and I've said that in the council, I'm wishing that we had more people with ideas to spread both the needs that are out there so we know them, as well as ways that we can reach out. People are busy, so, and of course, the challenge of COVID means we're not meeting except Zoom. And we can't do anything helping the congregation to understand what's happening with the denomination, because nothing's happening right now. There was supposed to be the general conference, which was canceled. We did have some meetings telling the congregation what was going to happen, but then it didn't happen. And then we're scheduled for an August, September general conference now, but it looks like that's not going to happen. So we do have the Bruce Scott Award, and there's a transgender group that is going to start to use the church and hopefully become kind of a part of the community once we can get back to church, but we can't. So all of those disconnects are great. We have been together just the other day, realizing there's somebody in the congregation who might be a part of the community who really needs to be connected. Not, you know, health issues are there, and the alone business. So we have taken that on as a more individual thing as a committee to raise that person and say maybe we can do some things, even writing notes every day or every week or whatever it might be. So we're trying to deal with issues as well as people, but we don't have enough people. We have great people that we have, but there's just not enough. So we really push, if anybody would like to join, there's no restrictions, there's no anything.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Anyone who's watching can know that they can contact you to join.
Absolutely.
So changing gears a little bit, then what are some of the bright spots that you experienced from serving on this committee?
I think the connection with the committee itself, being able to share what the committee is about with the rest of the congregation, um, and just the ability to keep raising the issue, keeping a positive spin on hopefully the church will move, the denomination will move, but it's nice to continue to remember the ways that Euclid doesn't necessarily respond to the restrictions of the denomination. I have to have a connection, a formal connection with a church in my conference, which is New England. So I have that with a church in Portland, and that church is called Hope Gateway. And so I say that Euclid is Hope Gateway West, or Hope Gateway is Euclid East.
Mhm.
So it's kind of nice to have the similar churches with somewhat different issues, but somewhat of the same kind of progressive moving forward without restrictions that the denomination might put on us.
Yeah, yeah. I'm feeling moved by the work that you and your committee are doing. So last question for you. We have not met in person for quite some time. What is one thing that you miss about worshiping in person at Euclid?
I think worshiping um, and the connection with the people. I think of Jamari, who sits in front of me, and we sort of have our little waves to each other during the service, and Jean Stein behind me. You know, people sit in their own places. It's funny in the church. And so you're used to seeing people and folks. I remember Lorraine used to be sort of toward the back, so I would see her as we would, pass the peace. And so it's just missing the people, and worship doesn't work as well when we're doing it virtually.
Yeah. There's something about being in person, the space, the hugs, the handshakes, the waves. Yeah, I feel that. Well, thank you so much for all you're doing for Euclid as well as on the Reconciling Committee. And we honor you and we thank you. Hopefully more of us will join.
I hope that'd be great. Okay,
Awesome.
thank you.
Yep, of course.
Okay.